All right, I guess it would be proper to say welcome to my personal museum on Indian Trace. Uh, there's something unique about this set here, which hasn't been seen by me in months, so probably by a lot of you for years, if you've been here for years. Uh, some who are new here, it's probably the first time that you've seen these. If I could show you a profile that goes on a sideways tangent of these, they are super thick, all about 2 inches, some a little bit longer than 2 inches. See what I mean? And thick and strong and made to be just that way. So we're going to take a look at some of these. These are like, I don't think any of these are knives. Let me get a good pull out of this and we'll just discuss these and take a look at them today. It's winter time. Time to do some display videos. Unless you're fortunate enough to be able to get out or have streams or whatever and be able to hunt in the winter. Not a whole lot going on around the dirt where I live. Now these points are, I've shown them once or twice, but they're devastatingly big. They're 50 caliber impact big. And they're all atlatl dart tips. I'm just amazed, and we're going to take a look at each one, at what it probably took to commission these. They probably suited a nice shaft for the atlatl. Got the point on there and it was heavy artillery. I mean, it was a serious load. And I guarantee these archaic Indians, woodland Indians, were far stronger than you and I are. And I'm a worker. And many of you guys out there are workers and you're plenty strong and you can do work. But these guys who made this, especially with the quartz, and Rob knows how difficult it is to make this quartz, were strong human beings. I'm gonna try to get this all in. I'm sorry. Let me do something here with the little layout. Just little adjustments. I'll do a frame like that someday with these because they are particularly unique. Massively thick. Let's just go ahead and start. I have a couple things I wanted to share today. Really cool perspective that I was thinking about. I'll go to that one last. It's more of a crystal based one. You can see that. Now let's go to this one. A point found at Notchville too. A little bit of strawberry quartz in it, but it is massive and thick. It would have delivered an impact that would be devastating. It would split right through the skin and shatter bone. I mean, it was just to kill and heavy. If you could get it off and if you could commission it out of an atlatl, it would hurt. It would kill. And that's what they needed it to do. And of course, there is the possibility. Now, I don't know how efficient it could be at all as a knife, so I don't think any of these are knives. But it's just a guess. I remember finding that at Notchville too, and I was just stunned by its size, and it was still a new time to find things. I was thinking, you know, when it came to people who have made an influence in history. Think about that sentence. People who have made a major influence on other people in history. Look at this point here from Deep White. So with that thought in mind, I wanted to share, I don't know, 5 names today, maybe 6, of people who have made a huge impact on other people for the positive, for the good. And how obvious it is to be able to know them by their enemies. You can know a person by their enemies easily. That is, if you're on the side of good, decency, kindness, righteousness. It's unbelievable how they just took a piece of quartz and went ahead and worked it to what they needed it to be to get the food that they needed. I'm sure this was devastating when it was all, look at the relief on the back of that. And then they could just haft it right in and it was set to go. Some good stuff, right? These are favorites. Came out of a particular place that I hide them. How about the first name going back, I guess, as far as you can go? Well, it's not as far as you can go. How about Jesus Christ? Jesus himself. My goodness. If he didn't have political enemies, my word, and religious enemies, if he didn't even have enemies in his own close company that were giving him problems and that he had to reprimand all the time in his disciples. So you could really tell who he was if you knew who his enemies were. It's pretty funny, isn't it? Not to mention the devil himself, who's behind most of the enemies that I speak of today. This is an awesome point I found at Mecca. Love it. It's a Marl Mountain, but it's just wanted to give you a slow close-up of these so you can see how big, strong these points are. Of course, all the quartz is translucent, so I won't hold it up. Now, let's move on. No doubt, hands down, how about the great positive influence of Martin Luther? Not Martin Luther King Jr., Martin Luther, who ushered in the Reformation of the church, the Protestant Reformation. He sacrificed his life. The 95 Thesis, nailed to the door of Wittenberg. Unbelievable tenets of the church, tenets of faith. His enemies? Well, let's just easily start with, of course, the devil, but the Catholic Church hated him. A price on his head. Look at this point. Found at Sun Hill. Super strong. Devastating. Yeah, Martin Luther. You can tell how good of a man he was based on his enemies. And he had a couple great allies that protected him. But he sacrificed his life for it. And unbelievable. How about we take something a little more modern, like Gandhi? Whew. You want to talk about both political and religious enemies? Yeah, he professed himself to be a man of the world, if you will, a statesman. He would easily say that he was a Hindu as much as he was a Christian, that he was a spiritual man most of all, above all things. But I'm going to tell you what, politically he was hated. All of these people I've mentioned are hated because they represented humanity. They were statesmen. They were hated. Politically, they were hated. And I mean, Gandhi was hated as much as he was loved, but by the minority of enemies. Isn't that interesting? Even now, we think about people in the current events and news and who they're hated by. It's a minority. It's not the majority of people who they represent. Isn't that interesting? Look at this point. Notchville Point. This quartz, man, it would have delivered. It's never changed in thousands of years. We're looking at things that human beings made 4,000 years ago to do their hunting and their harvesting with. Well, if not Gandhi, how about Mother Teresa? Some people out there might say, well, Mother Teresa didn't have any enemies. Oh, yes, she did. I can tell you those who were completely displeased with her and her actions and her missionaries for charity, because she just flat out did what God led her to do. It didn't please the Catholic Church, who she decided she would make a proclamation that she was leaving the Catholic Church to serve the Spirit of Christ, to serve God. And she did. And her missionaries for charity continued to grow. But she had political enemies. Why? Because she gained power. She won the crowd. You ever seen the movie The Gladiator? In the movie The Gladiator, the gladiators, keepers, if you will, told him that he could win his freedom, and his freedom, the key to his freedom would be winning the crowd. Look at this piece from Highlands. It's mixed with strawberry quartz. I mean, devastating, right? My goodness. Yeah, it's true in life. You win the crowd, you win the people, you win the heart of the basic common man, and you win. Now, think about that in terms of all the names. Think about that in terms of names that I continue with, in modern names, in modern leaders, things that are going on now. Okay, how about somebody who's more modern? Martin Luther King Jr. Well, political enemies are obvious. Since he was a statesman and he was born again Christian, very, very strong Christian. I don't think that snapped off there. Now, it could be. A lot of people know. But I think that's a Marl Mountain. And just the way they got the core of that quartz, I think they tried to haft it in. And if it would stay put and they could deliver it, it would do what it was designed to do. I don't know. It's an absolutely fantastic point, though. Strong as can be. Martin Luther King Jr., his enemy's obvious. Of course, he was martyred, assassinated, but so was Jesus. And there were many attempts, many, on Gandhi's life. People don't realize it. There were many attempts on Mother Teresa's life. But she was so devastatingly popular with the modern common man that people didn't dare touch her. They didn't dare mess with her. Of course, she was only like 4'11". But she had a huge influence. So Martin Luther King Jr., his enemies, politically, believe it or not, was the majority of the Democratic Party. Because the Republican Party supported and pushed for the abolishment of segregation, on, and because the birth, people don't want to hear the truth. I guarantee they know the birth of the KKK came out of the Democratic Party. You watch, they'll just ban my whole channel because of that. It's the truth. It's the truth. Type in and look up James Byrd. It's pitiful. Martin Luther King Jr.'s enemies were not conservatives. He was a conservative himself. Interesting. Interesting to look into who they used as a patsy and as the person they would push and convince to assassinate him. So it's interesting. You can always tell a man how good he is by his enemies, unless, of course, you agree with a man's enemies. Here's a great point right here. Love it. A point from the clay pot. Look at that. There's great natural light in here. Now, would I give another couple modern names? But when I do say their names, I want you to first see if you can think in the news here, modern news, who their enemies are. Let me start with one name. Alex Jones. Who's his enemies? Well, it's pretty obvious. Every driving engine that Google owns. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, the MSM. Even Hillary Clinton called him out by name. So if you take a look at his enemies in the modern time right now, sure as you live, I promise you a man can be known by his enemies, which should give you a lot of trust and confidence in somebody. And it's not to say that any one man, you or me, is always right. That's for sure. We're wrong often. And he admits that. He's the first to admit that. Every name that I've mentioned is easy to admit that. I've heard them admit that. I've listened to live tapes, live audio from Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King Jr. Well, I can't really, there's none to be had with Jesus, but the Bible's sure enough about that. But, sure as you live, you can tell a man by his enemies. And the second to last point, I found at Sun Hill. I mean, look at this thing. It's crazy. These would deliver an impact that would end the show. Moving at speed and velocity, and this quartz is so hard and sharp. It's just great stuff to me. Some of my favorite, even though it's completely imbalanced. You can tell that it's just, they took the quartz and used it as they could. Here's the last name, modern name. And when I say it, I want you again with me to think about the enemies of this person. Donald J. Trump. Does he have any political enemies? Does he have any enemies in the MSM? Does he have any enemies in the Catholic Church? Most people don't really want to know what the Catholic Church has been up to in world history, even in modern times. It's an incredible point, isn't it? But I'll leave it at that. Yes, you can always tell every single time a man by the enemies that look to destroy him. And then you're going to have to make your own choice of whether or not you're going to support a person based on the righteousness that's in you. Here's a great point from Site 2. This point, literally, as the crow flies, maybe 1 mile from where I'm sitting. Strong, though. Strong marble mountain made out of a slug of quartz. Looking for the best way the light hits it. Just taking time with some solid quartz. Probably looks like the ice and snow that a lot of you are getting. Anyway, just a little thought. For those of you who are young, if you happen to be watching this, Mike, send Cameron over to this. He needs to hear this video about being able to tell a man's character by the enemies that look to destroy him. Never fails, though. So this is devastatingly strong quartz. I've shown it before, but it's some of my favorites, and I don't see it that often, so I'll pull it out when it's cold or I can't get out and have much production. So from Indian Trace to all you out there, make sure, even your best friends, even yourself, you can tell who you are, who your friends are, by the people that look to destroy them. I know, that sounds really positive, doesn't it? Well, it's positive if you're in the company of the names that I mentioned, because there is nothing wrong with them. All different personalities. Of course, one stands aside from them all in Jesus Christ, but there's obvious reasons for that. Thanks for tuning in to Indian Trace. Hope everybody finds